April 21st, 1992. 3:49 in the morning. Robert Alton Harris is strapped into the chair inside San Quentin's gas chamber. The leather restraints bite into his wrists. Witnesses hold their breath. The executioner's hand hovers over the lever. The phone rings. A stay of execution. The fourth one that night. Guards rush in, unbuckle the straps, lead him back to his holding cell. 2 hours later, he'll be strapped in again. Truly find peace knowing what they've done. Courts battled behind closed doors while Harris sat in limbo, alive, but sentenced to die. Witnesses watched in disbelief. Prison staff didn't know whether they were conducting an execution or participating in some cruel legal experiment. This isn't just an execution. It's the consequence of choices and the relentless passage of time. With every delay, the room thickens with questions no one can truly answer. So, tell me below, do you believe someone can find redemption in their final hours? Or are their decisions too weighty to ever leave behind? To understand those final 24 hours, you need to know a little about the man sitting in that gas chamber. Robert Alton Harris was born on January 15, 1953, in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, 3 months premature after his father kicked his pregnant mother in the stomach during a drunken rage. His childhood was marked by relentless violence. At 18 months old, he was beaten unconscious with a bamboo pole, strangled with a sheet, and repeatedly knocked out by his father. His father, an alcoholic, was convinced Robert wasn't his biological son. He withheld affection, delivered constant beatings, and created an atmosphere of terror in their home. When Robert was 9, his father was convicted and imprisoned for sexually abusing Robert's sisters. By age 10, Robert was already attracting police attention for killing cats, though he claimed he only watched. At 13, he was placed in juvenile detention for stealing a car, where he was repeatedly sexually assaulted. At 14, his mother abandoned him in Sacramento, forcing him to live on the streets near his brother's house. He bounced between Oklahoma and juvenile facilities, eventually diagnosed as pre-psychotic and schizophrenic. Later evaluations revealed severe frontal lobe damage, likely from fetal alcohol syndrome, the beatings, and years of sniffing gasoline and paint fumes. This damage affected his ability to reflect on actions, weigh consequences, or reason rationally. On July 5, 1978, Robert Harris and his younger brother Daniel needed a getaway car for a bank robbery. They spotted 2 16-year-old boys, John Meiske and Michael Baker, eating lunch at a Jack-in-the-Box in Mira Mesa. Harris forced them at gunpoint to drive to an isolated area. When the boys tried to walk away, Harris shot John Meiske in the back, then in the head. He chased down Michael Baker, who was screaming and hiding in the brush, and shot him 4 times. Harris returned to John's body and shot him again, point blank. After robbing the bank, police arrested both brothers within an hour. On March 6, 1979, Robert Harris was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances and sentenced to death. He spent 13 years on death row at San Quentin. Here's the hard truth. Violence begets violence. Untreated trauma doesn't disappear. It compounds, infects, destroys. Without intervention, broken children become broken adults who break others. But this isn't a story about his crimes. This is about what happens when time runs out. April 20th, 1992. Harris's execution is scheduled for 12:01 a.m. But what should have been a straightforward procedure turned into one of the most chaotic nights in American legal history. As midnight approached, Harris's attorneys filed emergency appeals with multiple courts. The first stay came from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, just hours before the scheduled execution. The execution was postponed. Hours passed. The stay was lifted. Guards prepared Harris again, leading him down the corridor toward the gas chamber. Witnesses gathered. The warden stood ready. Then another stay. Harris was pulled back, returned to his holding cell. Staff scrambled to understand what was happening. Lawyers on both sides fought through the night, some trying to save his life, others demanding justice be carried out. By 3:49 a.m., Harris had been strapped into the gas chamber chair twice. Each time, the phone rang. Each time, another court intervened. The third stay came from a federal judge questioning the constitutionality of California's gas chamber, arguing it might constitute cruel and unusual punishment. Harris was unstrapped again, led back through the same hallway he'd already walked twice that night. Witnesses sat in stunned silence. Some wept. Others felt anger rising, not just at the delays, but at the spectacle of it all. Prison guards, trained to maintain composure, later admitted they'd never experienced anything like it. How would you cope with this psychological torture? Let me know in the comments. The fourth and final stay came just before dawn, but this time something changed. The U.S. Supreme Court had seen enough. At 6 a.m., the Supreme Court issued an unprecedented order, not just lifting the stay but barring any further delays. No more appeals, no more reprieves. The execution would proceed immediately. Harris was brought back to the gas chamber for the final time. He'd been awake for over 24 hours. He'd walked that corridor 4 times. He'd been strapped in, unstrapped, strapped in again. The witnesses, exhausted, traumatized, filed back into the viewing room. Some had gone home after the third delay, thinking it wouldn't happen. Others stayed, unable to look away from the legal and moral chaos unfolding before them. This wasn't just an execution anymore. It was a statement about finality, justice, and the limits of mercy. In the hours leading up to his execution, Harris received a handful of visitors, attorneys making final pleas, clergy offering spiritual counsel, and prison officials following protocol. But these weren't ordinary goodbyes. Every conversation carried the weight of finality. Every word spoken could be the last. His lawyers fought until the very end, filing appeals even as he sat waiting. Some held on to hope. Others simply wanted to be present, to witness humanity in its most vulnerable state. Harris dressed in new jeans and a blue shirt, standard protocol for death row inmates at San Quentin. It's a small dignity offered in the final hours, a reminder that beneath the criminal record and the headlines, there's still a person preparing to leave this world. Outside the prison, 2 very different groups gathered. Death penalty opponents held candlelight vigils, praying for a last-minute reprieve. Supporters of the victims' families stood across from them, some holding signs demanding justice after 14 years of waiting. Inside, the families of John Meiske and Michael Baker, the 2 teenage boys Harris murdered in 1978, prepared to witness the execution. For them, this wasn't about politics or legal philosophy. It was about closure, about seeing the man who destroyed their lives finally face consequences. But even closure comes with a cost. Watching someone die, even someone who took your loved one, leaves scars that don't heal easily. Some family members later described feeling empty rather than satisfied, haunted by what they'd seen rather than comforted by it. One of those witnesses was Steve Baker, a San Diego police officer who had arrested Harris 14 years earlier. He didn't realize at the time that one of the victims was his own son, Michael. Now, he stood just 6 feet from the gas chamber, watching the man who murdered his child prepare to die. In the final moments before the cyanide was released, Harris turned his head, caught Steve Baker's eye, and mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." Baker nodded once, a sharp, small acknowledgement. Was it forgiveness, acceptance, or just the final exchange between two men forever bound by tragedy. This is the ripple effect of violence. One act in 1978 created waves that reached into courtrooms, prison cells, families, and hearts, destroying everything in its path. There are no winners here, only survivors trying to make sense of senseless loss. Every condemned prisoner is offered a final meal, a last taste of the world they're about to leave behind. Harris requested a 21-piece bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken, 2 large Domino's pizzas, a bag of jelly beans, a 6-pack of Pepsi, and a pack of Camel cigarettes. Not gourmet, not sentimental, just ordinary. Think about that for a moment. If you knew these were your last hours, what would you choose? Would it be your grandmother's homemade dish? A meal from your childhood? Or would you, like Harris, reach for something familiar and simple? Comfort food that requires no explanation, no memory, no pain? There's something deeply human about that choice. No lobster, no steak, just fried chicken, pizza, and candy, the kind of meal you'd grab on a road trip or a lazy Sunday afternoon. Maybe that's the point. In his final hours, Harris wasn't trying to make a statement. He was grasping for normalcy in the most abnormal situation imaginable. Final meals reveal something raw about us. They show what we crave when everything else is stripped away. Not sophistication or meaning, but simple comfort. A brief escape from reality. A moment where you're not a condemned man, just someone eating fried chicken. What would your final meal be? It's a heavy question, but I'm curious. Drop your answer below. But here's the darker truth. Harris never actually ate most of it. The food sat there, growing cold, while the legal battles raged on. Every time he was led to the gas chamber, the meal remained untouched. By the time the final order came through at 6 a.m., hours had passed. The pizza was stale, the chicken congealed. The moment had come and gone. Even this small comfort, this last human ritual, was taken from him by the chaos of that night. It's a stark reminder. When your time runs out, nothing else matters. Not hunger, not comfort, not the carefully chosen meal sitting cold on a tray. The sun hadn't risen yet when Robert Alton Harris was led into San Quentin's gas chamber for the final time. 6:01 a.m. Guards strapped him into the metal chair. Arms, legs, chest, waist. He'd been through this 4 times already that night, but this time felt different. There was no phone call coming, no last-minute reprieve. The witnesses filed back into the viewing room, exhausted and traumatized from the night's legal chaos. Some had left after the 3rd delay, convinced it wouldn't happen. Others stayed, unable to turn away. Harris looked around the chamber one last time. The octagonal room was small, barely 8 feet across. The walls were pale green, stained by decades of executions past. 2 chairs sat bolted to the floor, though only one would be used today. He was alone now. 6:07 a.m. The warden gave the signal. Below Harris's chair, sodium cyanide pellets dropped into a container of sulfuric acid. The chemical reaction began immediately, producing hydrogen cyanide gas, the same poison used in Nazi death camps. The gas rose slowly, filling the chamber. Harris held his breath as long as he could. Witnesses later described the moment he finally inhaled, his body convulsing, his face contorting. He gasped for air that would only kill him faster. 6:14 a.m. Harris stopped moving. His head slumped forward against the restraints, but he wasn't dead yet. The gas continued its work, shutting down his organs one by one. Witnesses sat frozen, some crying, others staring blankly. The silence in the viewing room was absolute. 6:21 a.m., Robert Alton Harris was pronounced dead. California's first execution in 25 years was complete. The process wasn't over. Prison staff waited for the gas to dissipate, pumping it out of the chamber and neutralizing what remained. The air had to be safe before anyone could enter. 7:00 a.m. Guards, wearing protective equipment, finally opened the chamber door and removed Harris's body. They placed him on a gurney and wheeled him away. 8:15 a.m. His body was taken from the prison grounds. Outside, protesters and supporters alike dispersed into the morning light. Some felt relief. Others felt sick. Many felt nothing at all, just emptiness after watching a human being die in front of them. The witnesses would carry what they saw for the rest of their lives. Studies later showed that many experienced symptoms of post-traumatic stress, nightmares, flashbacks, anxiety. The execution of Robert Alton Harris didn't end the debate. It ignited it. Across California and the nation, people questioned what they'd witnessed. Death penalty opponents pointed to the chaotic legal battle, the psychological torture of multiple delays, and the brutality of the gas chamber itself. They argued that Harris's execution proved the system was broken, cruel, and ultimately inhumane. Supporters countered that justice had finally been served after 14 years of appeals. They pointed to John Meiske and Michael Baker, two teenage boys who never got a second chance, never got to appeal their murders. Both sides were right. Both sides were wrong. The truth, as always, was more complicated than any slogan or soundbite could capture. For the families of the victims, the execution brought no real peace. Steve Baker told reporters he felt numb rather than satisfied. The mother of John Meiske said she thought she'd feel relief, but instead felt haunted by what she'd witnessed. That's the hard truth about executions. They don't undo the crime. They don't bring loved ones back. They don't erase the trauma or fill the void left behind. Harris's execution also prompted California to reconsider its use of the gas chamber. In 1996, the state switched to lethal injection as its primary execution method, citing concerns about the gas chamber's cruelty. Harris's death, and the public's reaction to it, played a significant role in that decision. His case became a reference point in ongoing debates about capital punishment, mental health, childhood trauma, and criminal justice reform. The bigger questions remain unanswered. Does the state have the right to take a life, even in response to murder? Does execution serve justice, or does it simply perpetuate the cycle of violence? Harris's childhood, marked by brutal abuse, brain damage, and abandonment, raised uncomfortable questions about accountability and free will. If someone is shaped by trauma they didn't choose, are they fully responsible for the monster they become? There are no easy answers. Harris committed a horrific crime that destroyed multiple families, but his execution didn't heal anyone. It didn't prevent future violence. It simply ended one life in response to ending others. The moral weight of that exchange, life for life, pain for pain, continues to challenge our understanding of justice, mercy, and what it means to be human. Robert Alton Harris's final 24 hours weren't just about one man's death. They were about all of us, about the choices we make, the systems we build, and the consequences we're willing to live with. Violence has a cost that extends far beyond the immediate victims. It ripples outward, touching families, communities, witnesses, and even those tasked with carrying out justice. Everyone who entered San Quentin that night left changed. The guards who strapped Harris into the chair, the witnesses who watched him die, the lawyers who fought to save or condemn him, the families who waited 14 years for this moment. None of them walked away unscathed. Here's what we can take from this story. Our choices matter more than we realize. The violence Harris experienced as a child didn't excuse what he did, but it helps us understand how cycles of trauma perpetuate themselves. Breaking those cycles requires intervention, compassion for broken children before they become broken adults who break others. We also need to ask ourselves hard questions about justice. Does execution serve society, or does it simply satisfy our desire for retribution? Can we honor victims without becoming the very thing we condemn? These aren't easy questions, and there are no perfect answers. But they're questions worth asking. Robert Alton Harris's last 24 hours remind us that time is the one thing we can never get back. How we use it, the choices we make, the kindness we show, the violence we commit or prevent, defines not just our own lives, but the lives of everyone around us. If this story made you think, hit that like button. And if you want more deep dives into the human side of true crime, subscribe to True Crime Diaries. I'll see you in the next one.